it really comes down to playing the long game. Playing the long game. The long game is looking beyond just right now. As we talked about at the top of the episode and in today's newsletter, you can see the link below over at joindamon.me about the power of momentum. When it comes to the long game is about what strategic moves can I make right now that'll make everything better, ideally for everyone involved. Being married is a long game, an infinite game. Playing a football game, as there's some great examples, I'll give the links in a second, as Simon Sinek talks about in his book, Infinite Game. Playing a game of football or sports, that's a finite game. There's going to be a winner, there's going to be a loser, there's going to be an end. Any type of partnership, infinite game, until the partnership ends. But the intention isn't to end the partnership. The intention is that I'll give a great example. I've co-founded a couple companies. Shout out to Charlie and my other co-founders I've worked with in the past, particularly with Cuddler, which was kind of the startup that put us on the map about 10 years ago. And we ended up selling that. You can go and have an issue with your marriage partner, your co-parenting partner. I've co-authored several books behind my big head over here. And so your co-authoring partner, et cetera, et cetera, you can just go on. You can go and have a beef with them, have an issue with them, and the next morning they're still going to be in your face. You're going to wake up next to them. Hopefully you're not in a ditch somewhere, but but you're going to wake up next to them, and then whatever issues or whatever's left in the wake of that beef, that back and forth, it's still going to be there. You got a business partner, you guys are still invested together, no matter how much you guys curse each other out. If you have kids with somebody, so I got two kids. Doesn't matter what happens as parents, you still got these beautiful kids that are looking up to you as far as where is that leadership going to come from? It's going to come from you, you and hopefully the other people involved. That's the infinite game. A finite game is, Kendrick Lamar at the Super Bowl. A finite game is Kendrick Lamar and his beef with Drake. If you're up on hip hop, I've done some episodes on it. You can do it. Bringyourworth.tv if you want to get up to speed. That's a finite game. At a certain point, it's like, this is the victor. Okay, great. And then everyone's going to move on to the next thing. Infinite games are what we play with our lives. Me doing Bring Your Worth TV and showing up for y'all, that doesn't mean the show will be around forever. I, Forever, as far as I can tell, doesn't mean it's going to be around forever. It means I committed to showing up for y'all Wednesdays live at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. I didn't say until April of 2018. I was like, no, this is the commitment. So the infinite game is really the commitment you make to yourself and to the people that you work with, the people that you serve. This ties into momentum because it's easier to have momentum. We don't have that finish line. We don't have that deadline. We just say, I'm going to show up next Wednesday. I'm going to show up for the live show. All right. That's the commitment. I'm not talking about the live show in November of 2030. No, I'm talking about the live show next week. And then when the live show next week happens, then it'll be like, all right, I'll show up the week after that. All right, I'll show up the week after that. What's the commitment? The commitment is I'm going to show up next week. That's a commitment. Does it always happen? No. Again, I missed last week because I had some family stuff going on, which, again, between y'all and hanging out with my family, I'm going to pick my family every time. Sorry. But because there's momentum set up, because it's based on the long game, there's not that cycle of shame. You might have heard about this before. It's coming up recently. It's come up a lot with the government things going on. Ooh, it's a crazy time in the world right now. The cycle of shame basically means this. You do something, you feel shame about it. And if you watch previous episodes, you know that guilt means something that you feel bad about internally. Like, yeah, I should have showed up for that. Shame That's guilt. Shame is, wow, I screwed up and everyone's judging me. So it's an external thing. Shame can be way more dangerous. Not saying they're good or bad, but shame, a lot of things that we've done for shame. And that's because we're afraid of that public ridicule. And in some ways, it doesn't even matter. This is the important part. It doesn't matter whether people feel that way or not. The fact that I missed the episode last week and I made a commitment of being there next Wednesday, and it's like, no, I can't be there. Guilt is saying, man, I wish there was a way I could make it work, but I couldn't. That sucks. Okay, I'll do better next time. That's guilt. Shame is saying, wow, the 18,000 people that currently subscribe to here are going to be so disappointed, and they're not going to want to watch any of my show ever again. Everything's downhill from here. I don't know what y'all think. You might not even miss me. I wouldn't be offended. That's okay. It's a busy time. It's okay. You already subscribed. It's cool. We'll catch each other next Wednesday. So it doesn't matter when it comes to shame. It doesn't matter what the other person's saying or what the society's saying. Think about what society thinks. There's major polls, from Gallup and all those guys, because I'm showing my age. Those other folks, they do polls now from, again, the Gallup like polls. There's social media. There's so many ways they're trying to gauge how people feel. Often they're wrong. So how are you going to know how other people feel about it? That begins what's called a shame cycle, because you're thinking you made a mistake or you did something that you consider a mistake. Then you're like, everyone's judging me over it. Because everybody's judging me over it, then I can't show my face. Because I can't show my face, then I have to stop and I'm going to quit to save face, which is where the term comes from. To save face, I'd rather quit. That's the shame cycle. And as that cycle continues, then you end up losing that momentum that we're talking about. If you're focused on the long game, shout out to Dory Clark. If you're focused on the infinite game, shout out to Simon Sinek as well as the authors before him that have talked about finite games versus infinite games. If you're focused on the infinite game, then that means you're going to get another opportunity to show up. Again, me missing last week's show, it's not a big deal to me, but it's a good example. Me missing last week's show, I knew I'd be back in the game this week. And I'm like, all right, hey, let's go. Sorry for the clap. Hopefully it's not too loud. It's like, let's go. All right, let's go. Ready for this week's show. This is how you show up. This is momentum. Momentum allows you to make quote unquote mistakes, to have not everything go perfectly, and to still show up for the next thing. I think it was Seth Godin as well as some other folks have talked about what actual habit forming means. Habit forming means you miss something once, but you make sure you don't miss it the second time. That's what it means. It doesn't mean you show up and have to do it every single day, because life happens, stuff happens, especially as you start adulting, stuff happens. Real momentum, though, allows you to take that one dip, make that one wrong turn, miss that one opportunity, and then show up for the next one with equal fervor. I think it was Winston Churchill that talked about real strength is losing and then still showing up with equal fervor and momentum. I'm paraphrasing him. Rest in peace to Winston Churchill as well. But that's the basic idea of his saying. And I watched a biography of him a few years ago on a plane. I was like, I was on a long flight. I was like, wow, you have to decide. You really have to decide if you live the life he lived. You think about the lives that a lot of us live. How is that momentum going to carry you forward? I believe it if it comes to finding out what the long game is, playing the long game, focused on the infinite game. My infinite game is support all the side hustlers, solopreneurs, other non-traditional entrepreneurs, as many as possible within the world. So it's beyond just me having a certain episode. It goes deeper than that. Exactly. Momentum can feed more momentum, but the trick is getting it started is a trick. That's right. I agree 100%. And getting it started, I think, begins like we talked about in the very beginning of the episode. Feel free to rewind or catch some other clips where we talked about finding your momentum. That comes from finding those things that are autotelic, those things that are self-motivating, that will keep you going, that aren't based on some type of immediate reward. The second level of that, I believe, is playing the long game, saying, I'm in this for the long haul, but all I have to do is worry about showing up the next time. I do daily meditations. Thing I have to do worry about is I wake up in the morning and that I meditate. I can't think about how much I'm going to meditate in the next 10 years. Meditating for many years. I can't think about the next 10 years. That that's a momentum ender. So the long game isn't necessarily thinking about where you're going to be in a decade from now. The long game is figuring out what exactly is my intention going forward. That in itself creates the long game. As I've implied and teased, The Infinite Game by Simon Sinek, excellent book. Shout out to Simon. He talks about finite games, again, example of football, whether you're doing the British football or the American football, there's an end to it, versus an infinite game, like a long term partnership. And I mean long term, like whether it's to death to us part, or you guys have invested money together and then you guys are co founders. And yeah, I've done all kinds of partnerships. Those are infinite games because you can't make these quick moves. You can't just focus on speed. You have to be strategic. You have to show up regularly. Frankly, even when you don't want to, that's a good place to start. And I did a video really early on. I want to say, I don't think I have the episode number on this one. I would say it was episode 40 or something. You're watching episode 414. So you'll see me. That's gray hair, a lot more hair on top of my head, talking about Simon Sinek's guaranteed secret to success. Most of us won't do. One of my favorite conversations is actually related to the Ink column I did. Shout out to Ink Magazine, where I've had a column with them for the past 8 years. This is when I was really in my stride as far as the Ink column. So it talks a lot about what I was talking about in the Ink column. So what about y'all? How are y'all playing the the infinite game? It's like, what games are you guys playing? How are you guys playing the infinite game? And where does that matter? I love to hear in the comments. You are listening and watching, depending on where you're at. You might be watching my big head on video. You might be listening right now on the podcast. Shout out to y'all. I'm entrepreneur coach Damon Brown, here to help you as a side hustler, solopreneur, otherwise a non-traditional entrepreneur. You're watching Bring Your Worth TV Wednesdays live at 1:11 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, Vegas time. You can subscribe for free. You can get the complete Bring Your Worth collection wherever fine books are sold. And of course, links below if you want to listen to the audiobook. As soon as we're done here, you can listen to it over at bringyourworth.tv. I'd love to hear how you guys are playing the long game. And if you're not familiar with the long game, how does that inform your thinking? I'd love to hear.